Picture this. For years, you've probably heard that real financial security only begins once you've saved an entire year's worth of income. Ironically, that advice is often the very reason so many people never manage to build an emergency fund in the first place. Let's replace that belief with something far more practical. The amount you actually need is much smaller than the intimidating figure you've been carrying around in your head. Even if you earn $50,000 a year, you can realistically reach that goal faster than someone making twice your salary who still couldn't afford a single major car repair. Think about two different people. Kiara earns $50,000 per year. She doesn't have a spouse's income to fall back on if she loses her job. She works in an industry where layoffs happen in waves, and finding another position can easily take several months. Just a few years ago, her life looked like many people living on modest incomes, making it through each month while hoping nothing expensive broke before the next paycheck arrived. Now consider Byron. He earns $90,000 annually, almost double Kiara's income. Byron isn't careless with money. The problem is that every raise he receives quickly turns into higher spending. A larger apartment, a newer vehicle, better furniture, slightly nicer everything. None of those purchases seem unreasonable individually. On paper, he looks like the most financially successful employee in the office. Yet, despite earning far less, Kiara eventually built genuine financial stability, while Byron remained just one unexpected expense away from panic. They started from similar emotional mindsets, but ended up in completely different financial realities. How does someone earning only half as much become the more financially secure person? How can a modest income outperform a much larger one? And why does the traditional advice surrounding emergency funds leave both people feeling stuck before they even begin? Here's the deeper question. How can the most common recommendation, saving an entire year's salary, actually prevent people from building any emergency fund at all? Why can someone with a lower income end up feeling safer than someone earning almost twice as much? And why does changing the way we define the goal suddenly make it seem attainable? According to data from the Federal Reserve, a surprisingly large percentage of Americans would struggle to cover an unexpected $1,000 expense without relying on a credit card. When your emergency savings balance is zero, every flat tire, medical bill, or surprise repair immediately becomes debt. That debt then accumulates interest, making it even harder to build savings in the future. Now look at the numbers. Someone earning $50,000 annually typically brings home around $3,500 per month after taxes. Basic survival costs, rent, groceries, insurance, transportation, and utilities usually total about $2,500 monthly. That leaves approximately $1,000 remaining. Unfortunately, for many households, that extra money slowly disappears through lifestyle spending without anyone consciously noticing. Meanwhile, Byron's $90,000 salary produces roughly $6,000 per month after taxes. The problem is that his lifestyle has expanded alongside his income until it consumes nearly everything he earns. He manages to save only about 5% of his income, roughly $375 each month. Kiara, despite earning far less, consistently saves around $800 every month. The lower income earner is saving more than twice as much as the higher income earner. There's another overlooked factor. Most traditional savings accounts in the United States still pay less than 0.5% interest annually. High-yield savings accounts currently offer returns closer to 4%, roughly 8 times higher. On a $30,000 emergency fund, that difference translates into approximately $1,200 more interest each year simply by choosing a better account. Let's give this phenomenon a name: the income illusion trap. It's the tendency to focus on total salary instead of actual living costs. People automatically assume an emergency fund should equal 1 year's income rather than 1 year's essential expenses. That mistake creates a savings goal so overwhelming that many never even begin. At the same time, it hides an important truth. Surviving costs far less than most people imagine. Everything changed for Kiara because of a single sentence she came across one evening. An emergency fund isn't a year of your income, it's a year of your essential expenses. Those two numbers are much farther apart than most people realize. Whenever people hear the phrase 1 year of emergency savings, their brains instinctively substitute 1 year of salary. For someone earning $50,000, that sounds almost impossible. Saving another $50,000 feels so overwhelming that many people never take the very first step. But Kiara never actually needed $50,000. When she added together her rent, groceries, insurance, utilities, and other essential bills, the true cost of simply keeping her life functioning came to roughly $2,500 per month. Over 12 months, that's approximately $30,000. That's still a significant goal. It's still challenging, but climbing toward $30,000 is a completely different challenge than trying to reach $50,000. One target fits within the reality of her income. The other exists mostly as an impossible mental barrier. The difference between those two numbers represented money she had spent years treating as permanently unavailable, even though it never needed to be. Her first real task was calculating her genuine survival expenses, something very few people do honestly. She downloaded 3 months of bank statements and divided every expense into only 2 categories. The first category contained the expenses required to keep her life functioning: rent, basic groceries, gasoline for work, insurance, electricity, and the phone she genuinely needed to remain employed. Everything else went into the second category: restaurant meals, online impulse purchases, multiple streaming subscriptions she barely watched, and all the small comforts that seem essential until you list them together on paper. Only the first category mattered when calculating her emergency fund. Why? Because during a true financial emergency, the second category naturally disappears. Very few people continue paying for 4 streaming services during the month they've lost their job. Once Kiara separated survival expenses from lifestyle expenses, she discovered something surprising. The amount she truly needed to stay afloat was much lower than she'd always assumed. For years, she'd believed maintaining her normal spending was the same thing as staying financially secure. It wasn't. The gap between those two numbers had always existed. She simply hadn't recognized it. People who build lasting financial security don't obsess over saving an entire year's salary. Instead, they calculate exactly what it costs to survive, make that number their target, and build toward it through consistent, automatic systems. They also understand another important principle. Before attempting to save an entire year's expenses, they first create a small emergency cushion, just $1,000 set aside in a separate account. It may sound insignificant, but that small reserve transforms a crisis into an inconvenience. An unexpected $500 expense no longer forces someone into high-interest debt. That single buffer creates enough breathing room for every future step to become easier. They also recognize the value of high-yield savings accounts. Instead of earning 0.5%, they choose accounts paying around 4% while still benefiting from government-backed deposit insurance and essentially the same level of safety as traditional banks. The higher returns simply come from lower operating costs rather than additional investment risk. On a $30,000 balance, that difference can generate roughly $100 to $150 every month while the money remains completely secure. They follow one simple rule before touching that emergency fund. An expense must be urgent, necessary, and unexpected, all three at the same time. Miss even one requirement, and it isn't an emergency. Car registration isn't unexpected. Holiday shopping isn't unexpected. Annual insurance premiums aren't unexpected. Those expenses deserve their own sinking funds instead of draining emergency savings. Finally, financially secure people understand the correct order of operations. They build their emergency fund before aggressively investing. Someone with no cash cushion who invests everything eventually faces the worst possible timing. A market downturn arriving at exactly the same moment they suddenly need cash. The priority is building the safety net first. Optimization comes afterward. Kiara created financial breathing room through 4 practical changes, and none of them required living an extreme or joyless lifestyle. Lever 1. Housing. Rather than renting the largest apartment her income technically allowed, she shared a smaller place with a roommate during her first few years. That single choice reduced her housing costs by roughly $500 every month, adding up to nearly $6,000 every year directed toward her emergency fund. Lever 2. Transportation. She continued driving an older, fully paid-off vehicle that wasn't glamorous but was dependable. While many people around her upgraded cars every few years and took on monthly payments, higher insurance premiums, and increased registration costs, Kiara simply kept that money in her own bank account. Lever 3. Food. She prepared most of her meals herself, not by surviving on plain rice or making herself miserable, but by recognizing that the same $12 spent at the grocery store could provide several meals, while $12 spent through a delivery app bought a single dinner plus service fees and a tip. Lever 4. Lifestyle creep. This was the hidden leak almost nobody notices. Forgotten subscriptions, small upgrades, tiny recurring purchases, minor yes decisions that slowly accumulate into a surprisingly large monthly total. When Kiara carefully reviewed her spending, she discovered nearly $150 every month disappearing through expenses she'd stopped paying attention to. Eliminating them didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like recovering money she'd unknowingly been leaving behind. Cutting those expenses didn't feel like giving something up. It felt more like discovering cash she'd unknowingly been leaving behind every month. Once you combine those 4 changes, saving $1,000 each month stops feeling like an unrealistic dream and starts looking like straightforward math. There's another piece that most people get wrong: automation. Kiara never tried to save whatever happened to remain at the end of the month because, for most people, nothing is ever left by then. Instead, she completely reversed the process. The moment her paycheck arrived, a predetermined amount was automatically transferred into a separate savings account before she had a chance to spend it, or even mentally count it as available money. Instead of saving what was left after spending, she spent what remained after saving. That simple shift accomplishes more than almost any budgeting system ever could. Rather than depending on willpower dozens of times each month, you make one decision once, then allow the system to repeat it automatically without requiring constant discipline. She also kept her emergency savings at an entirely different bank. Since transferring money back took a day or two, that small delay created just enough friction to stop impulsive purchases from raiding the account. Sometimes what you don't immediately see truly stays out of your mind. The timeline itself played an important role. It took Kiara just over 3 years to fully build her emergency fund. During the very first month, she reached her initial $1,000 buffer. For the first time in her adult life, an unexpected expense no longer threatened to throw her finances into chaos. After 3 months, she had accumulated enough savings to absorb many of life's ordinary emergencies: a car repair, an unexpected medical bill, or a broken laptop. By the 6-month mark, she had reached a milestone that many households never achieve: half a year's worth of essential expenses sitting quietly in reserve. Around the 2nd year, something unexpected happened. Saving money stopped feeling like deprivation. Instead, it began to feel as though the account itself was carrying her forward, especially once the interest payments started contributing their own extra $100 or so every month toward the finish line. So why do intelligent people often create financial goals that practically guarantee failure? Why does Kiara's $30,000 target feel realistic, while the familiar advice to save an entire year's salary leaves so many people completely overwhelmed? The answer is surprisingly simple. Your brain struggles to pursue a destination that has never been clearly defined. Telling yourself you'll save more someday provides no measurable finish line. But identifying one precise number, $30,000, not $50,000, specifically $30,000, changes the entire experience. Suddenly the goal becomes concrete rather than abstract. Another obstacle quietly works against many high earners: lifestyle creep. It happens so gradually that it rarely feels like an actual choice. Every time Byron receives a raise, his expenses slowly expand until they consume almost all of the additional income. Before long, he feels just as financially stretched earning $90,000 as he once did earning $60,000. Kiara intentionally took the opposite approach. Whenever her income increased, she resisted the urge to improve her lifestyle. Instead, she simply increased the automatic transfer going into savings. A raise you never allow yourself to spend is a raise that lifestyle inflation can never take away. Then there's another challenge that rarely gets discussed: the invisibility of boring progress. From the outside, nothing about Kiara appeared financially impressive. She earned the same modest paycheck as everyone else. She drove an older car. She lived with a roommate. She often declined expensive dinners without offering much explanation. To her co-workers, she looked like someone who was simply getting by, perhaps even struggling financially. What they failed to realize was that the boring part wasn't an unfortunate consequence. It was the strategy. A quiet, automatic transfer every couple of weeks looks completely insignificant, until one day you realize it has quietly become an entire year of financial freedom. Step 1. Determine your true survival cost. Review the last 3 months of your bank statements and divide every expense into only 2 categories: essential survival expenses and everything else. Be brutally honest with yourself. Your emergency fund should be based on what you truly need to survive, not on your gross annual salary. Step 2. Build your first safety cushion. Before worrying about saving an entire year's expenses, focus on accumulating your first $1,000. It may seem small, but it prevents the cycle of borrowing whenever life throws you an unexpected bill. Minor emergencies become manageable inconveniences instead of financial disasters. Step 3. Eliminate high-interest debt first. Credit card interest compounds much faster than any savings account can grow. If you're carrying expensive debt, create a modest emergency cushion first, then direct every available dollar toward eliminating that debt. Once it's gone, return your attention to fully funding the emergency reserve. Step 4. Automate everything. As soon as every paycheck arrives, schedule an automatic transfer into a dedicated savings account, preferably at another bank. This removes the need for constant self-control. You make the decision once. Then you allow automation to do the work for years. Step 5. Choose a high-yield savings account. Store your emergency fund in an account earning around 4% rather than 0.5%. These accounts remain government-insured and just as secure as traditional savings accounts. The difference comes from lower operating costs, not additional investment risk. On a $30,000 balance, that higher interest can produce roughly $1,200 more each year. Step 6. Define what counts as an emergency. Use one straightforward rule. A genuine emergency must satisfy 3 conditions simultaneously. It must be urgent, it must be necessary, it must be unexpected. If an expense fails even one of those tests, it doesn't belong in your emergency fund. Expected costs such as annual insurance premiums, vehicle registration, or holiday spending deserve separate sinking funds. Step 7. Celebrate progress along the way. Don't wait until you've reached the final goal. Celebrate your first month of expenses. Recognize the moment you reach 3 months. Appreciate the security that comes with 6 months. Long-term goals often fail because the middle feels invisible. Milestones make progress visible and help maintain motivation. Now imagine two different versions of the same story. In the first version, your car suddenly needs an expensive repair. Most people around you reach for a credit card charging 20% interest. They carry the balance month after month, paying interest on top of interest while the debt quietly follows them. In the second version, you've already built an emergency fund covering a full year of essential expenses. The repair is still frustrating, but it isn't catastrophic. It's simply one afternoon, one repair bill, and a slightly smaller balance in the account you intentionally built for exactly this situation. Now imagine the emergency isn't your car. Imagine it's your job. A wave of layoffs hits your company. In the first scenario, panic immediately takes over. Your monthly bills continue arriving. Your savings disappear within weeks. You accept the very first job offer you receive, negotiate from fear, and tolerate conditions you would never have accepted if you had more breathing room. In the second scenario, you have an entire year of financial runway. You can patiently search for the right opportunity. You negotiate from confidence rather than desperation. You can afford to walk away from bad offers. And the person who can walk away usually ends up making the better deal. In the end, genuine financial security doesn't really feel like having money. It feels like having options. It feels like a protective wall standing between you and the worst version of your future. Those options transform nearly every decision you make. There's another benefit people rarely mention. People with a fully funded emergency reserve sleep differently. That constant background anxiety about money, the quiet stress that turns every unexpected phone call, text message, or repair into a wave of dread, gradually disappears. Perhaps the biggest surprise is that a fully funded emergency fund doesn't just allow you to avoid disasters. It allows you to pursue opportunities. You can return to school, accept a lower paying position with much greater long-term potential. Move across the country for a meaningful opportunity. Start the side business you've talked about for years, but never felt financially safe enough to attempt. Fear automatically says no to nearly all of those possibilities. A full year of financial runway finally gives you the freedom to consider saying yes. So ask yourself one final question. Which version of this story do you want to live? The person earning more money yet constantly feeling financially stretched, always one unexpected expense away from crisis? Or the person earning less but quietly building a wall of choices, confidence, and protection between themselves and life's worst moments? That decision belongs entirely to you. And despite what conventional financial advice often suggests, it's a goal that's entirely achievable using your actual income, your real expenses, and whatever amount you're able to begin setting aside today.